Bulan Institute followers, good afternoon. I am very happy to be today in Geneva with Mr. Mark Finot. Mr. Mark Finot is a senior program advisor on the Emerging Security Challenges programs at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. He is also in charge of the Proliferation Arms Program and cluster at that center. He was previously a French diplomat, and he served in many countries such as the former USSR and Moscow. Mr. Mark Finot, thank you for being with us. I would just give to our followers a quick update or information about the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations. It's a non-governmental organization, newly born, and it focused on security issues at the Central Asian region. We are conducting research, field projects, and analysis on security issues at the region. Mr. Mark Finot, the current situation of armed trades and the race of armament in the whole world, MENA region or in China and superpowers are playing a major role in this role. The current market is growing very fast and at the global level. So could you please elaborate and describe for us the current armed situation in the world, and if you see any difference between the current situation and the same situation 10 years ago?
Yes, of course we have to distinguish to know exactly what we are talking about. Sometimes we look at global military spending, global military expenditure, which is evaluated by the Stockholm Institute for Peace Research around $1,800 billion per year. So it looks like a huge sum of money. Now, if you compare this to the global GDP, this would be an average of between 2 and 3% of global GDP. So we have to put things in perspective. So the average world spending on military, which means include, of course, military equipment, hardware, but also armed forces, manpower, soldiers, the average is 2.5, 2.6%. However, we can see some huge gaps or huge differences depending on the countries, on the region. You would see in Europe, for instance, it's between 1 and 2% of GDP. US is already 4%, but you see countries like Saudi Arabia, where it's 11%, not even mentioning North Korea, where it's almost or over 20%. So you can see these regional disparities. Now, if we look at now another issue, which is the trade in armaments, it's a much smaller figure, which depends every year on the contracts, on the delivery. So it depends what you're looking at. If you only focus on major armaments, heavy armaments, or which actually have the highest value, or if you include small arms and light weapons, which are of lesser value, but which have huge numbers, which can have major impact, especially in regional conflicts. So, the average would be around 100 billion per year, sometimes less, sometimes more. But the global trend, if you look at precisely 10 years or 20 years ago, we've seen a period of relative decline in military spending and in arms trade. And now we see, for the past few years, we see a new increase. And obviously, this is related to the spread of conflicts, especially in the Middle East, but also the fact that big powers like China or India are also either importing or exporting armaments, and therefore this affects the global statistics. Now, if you look at this global trend again, you will see there are some permanent features. Permanent features are that let's say the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are in the top 5 or top 6, depending. Sometimes China is overtaken by UK or the other way around. And Germany now is becoming also a leading exporting country. So you have these major exporting countries, and then you have on the other side, you have the major importing countries such as India, Saudi Arabia. And so this is where you can see the regional dimension of this phenomenon.
Our followers, I would welcome you to send us any comments and questions online. I will make sure to answer all of them in this session. Mr. Mark, thank you for highlighting all this important point. But all these superpowers and the states in general, they argue that this huge spending on arms and budget of defense is to maintain peace. Is it really maintaining peace, or they are creating a war, kind of a future war, and these spending, they don't have any meaning because some superpowers are just spending large parts of their budgets on unnecessary arms deals.
Yes. I think you have to look at this phenomenon from both the political security angle, but also the economic angle, because it's a huge market. Obviously, the producers, whether they're state-owned or private, exercise great influence to promote their sales and their trade. And obviously, this can have an impact on the decisions of the governments. And this is why now it's important that we have a new legal instrument to regulate this aspect. It's the Arms Trade Treaty, which has been a major success of the international community, and now puts into place regulations and norms, international norms for exporting countries to assess the risk that their weapons would be used to commit mass violations of human rights, crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, etc. So this is a new requirement that is posed on exporting countries. So hopefully this will have regulating impact. Now, the other aspect is political security related. And this is, again, looking at the map, this is where you see that usually exporting states have some regional clients in some particular countries or regions. And importing countries also have their preferred suppliers. It's not an absolute equal market where competition, plays its role. There is, of course, a great degree of competition, but there is a system of clientele which has been developed by the exporting countries, which ensures some stability in their trade, because they don't only sell a particular weapon, they also sell a whole system of weapons, including hardware, software, manpower, know-how, technology, and spare parts and components, etc. So it's a whole package that includes and that ensures the continuity of trade. So obviously this has a major impact. Now, whether this trade is a cause of the conflict, or whether it fuels the conflict, or it can help to stabilize conflict, of course there is no general rule. This can happen in some cases, and again, this is why it's so important to have this instrument to regulate this trade. Now we can see, for instance, that even sort of minor trades such as small arms and light weapons, in economic terms, it's only $4-5 billion per year. So compared to 100 billion, it's little. However, this can have a major destabilizing effect in regional conflicts, in domestic conflicts, internal conflicts, and in particular also because it's so easy to divert this trade from its authorized end users, which could be regular armed forces or police, to non-authorized users that can be all sorts of non-state actors, terrorist groups, etc. And we can see this is a major security threat which now affects practically all countries, and again that needs to be controlled through this legal instrument, the Arms Trade Treaty, but also through international cooperation with Interpol, regional organizations, etc.
Dr. Fino, you mentioned the 2014 Arm Treaty and its positive impact. So could you please elaborate with some numbers about this impact? Because I think the estimated number of illicit arms trade went up to $1 billion per year in the year in 2014. So do we have any statistics that shows that the treaty worked very well and it had a positive impact?
I think it's too early to say because it's the treaty entered into force at the end of 2014. Now it's sort of in early phases of implementation. States have to send an initial report to explain what they have done to adopt the regulations in their own national systems. Then they have to report every year on imports and exports. So only after some time we will see impact in practice. But I think it's a strong framework and a strong incentive for cooperation. Again, no state can deal with this independently. By definition, illicit markets are very difficult to identify, understand. I mean, the numbers can only be estimates. So we need more research, and this is why some organizations, in particular in Geneva, work on this, like the Small Arms Survey, CIPRI, other organizations. So it's important to work together to have a better idea of how these systems of illicit trafficking function. And this is another reason also to maybe understand the interrelationship between this phenomenon and other related phenomena such as organized crime, terrorism, illicit migration, because all these non-state actors involved in this trafficking, they take advantage of loopholes in national legislation. They take advantage of weak states, weak governments, and this is where there is a need for improving this legal means of responding to this phenomenon, which can only rely on international cooperation.